Hello everyone, Happy New Year and a slightly belated Merry Christmas from me here at Mossy Bottom. I just wanted to let everyone know that I'm still alive out here in the wilds. Winter has definitely come, but it has not taken me yet. I know it's been a while since my last video. You might think that winter in fact is a quiet time of year with less to do, but in fact the opposite is true. It's the only time of year that all the weeds die back and the grass and the nettles, and I can actually get out and cut trees, chop logs, prune things, and of course prepare the soil for the next growing season. So there's a huge amount of outdoor work, very physical outdoor work, and of course the days are that much shorter, so there's very limited time to go out and do stuff. And it's colder, so everything's harder to do. We've also had quite a few severe storms over the last few months here in the west of Ireland. In fact, I was about to make a video a few months ago about my vegetable growing successes and failures for this past season. When that very night a huge storm blew in and took out really what was left of my above ground crops. So things like the peas and beans and a lot of the brassicas, they were just blown over and destroyed. Some of the brassicas, the kale, the broccoli to some extent has come back, but it really did do a lot of damage. So that kind of put pay to my vegetable successes video, as there wouldn't have been much successful to look at that stage. In fact, that storm also did quite a bit of damage along the lane here, or boreen, I must call it, as a few people have commented that I should use the Irish word. But yeah, a few trees came down, and I was actually trapped here on my land for several days, because of course this road that connects to the house, it's no one else uses it, so the council don't come in and clear trees if they fall onto it. It's pretty much me or no one. So I had to go along there with my chainsaw and clear it all away, which took several days. So in a way that was quite exciting, being trapped here, but a bit scary too. If I hadn't had food, it could have been an unpleasant situation. So I've had a few things to contend with over the last few months, but that's kind of life out here. Sometimes it gets in the way. Anyway, the first thing I want to do is to thank everyone for all the wonderful supportive comments that I've received for the videos that I posted over the summer. And for everyone who's subscribed to the channel. I've read all the comments and all the mails that I've received. I try to reply and respond to as many as I can. It's been a bit overwhelming over the Christmas period, so I haven't managed to reply to everyone, but I promise you I read them all, and they make me smile on a daily basis, so I'm really very, very grateful. It's a wonderful thing to have that level of support and encouragement. So today it's New Year's Eve, and it's dark outside, as you can probably see, and I'm huddled up in my caravan with the wood-burning stove roaring away in the background. And yes, I am wearing a scarf indoors. This has become a bit of a habit since I moved here. It's definitely not a fashion statement, I can promise you that. It's purely for practical reasons. But anyway, I can't make a video outside, but I thought I would take this opportunity to answer some questions. Specifically the 3 questions that I'm asked the most in comments and mails and from people that get in touch with me. So that's what this video is going to be about. And yes, it is going to be me staring at a camera blathering on for a bit. I know some of you like that, and I know some of you don't. For those of you who don't, the next video, I promise, is going to be a lot more action-packed and practical, so bear with me. There's not much I can do right now apart from sit and talk, so that's what I'm going to do. So the first question, and the one that I think I probably get asked the most, is how do I survive financially out here? So to quickly recap, back in early 2016, I bought a ruined old cottage with about an acre of land out here in Western Ireland. And I'm slowly restoring the cottage and turning the land into a sustainable smallholding, growing my own food with fruit trees and vegetables every year, and keeping my own animals and living as sustainably and environmentally as I possibly can. So the answer to that question really is, for over a decade I've worked in office-based jobs, and during that time saved as much money as I could every year. I've never been on a vacation as an adult. The last vacation I had, I was 15. I don't really buy expensive things. I'm not into flash cars or gadgets or techie things. The most frivolous thing I really spend money on is books, which doesn't tend to break the bank too much. So by living very, very frugally, I've been able to save money during that period. And I don't think too many people in their 20s, which I'm not anymore, by the way, are able to save money in the way that I was. So I'm thankful for that, because it's afforded me the chance to create this life at the age I am now. So I was able to buy the cottage outright. There's no mortgage here. I don't have to pay any rent. I own it, not the bank. So I'm in a really good position because of that. But do bear in mind that the cottage here is a ruin, and when I bought it, it was the price of it was actually less than a deposit on a similar sized property would be in the UK. So extraordinarily cheap. And I think that's because there's so many of these old ruined cottages in Western Ireland, especially if you go far away from places like Galway and Sligo, really out into the rural, remote areas. They're 10 to a penny, these old cottages, and they're largely unoccupied. People don't want to live in them. They want to build new houses, new big expansive bungalows, and that's where people want to live now, not in old stone cottages, which is very, very sad, but there you go. Hopefully it's a trend that will change in the coming decades when people see the value in these old cottages and the history. So yeah, I was able to buy the cottage outright, which means that my monthly outgoings are manageable. I don't have a huge chunk that has to go on paying the mortgage or paying the rent. And I'm also, I grow a lot of my own food, so my food bill is less than half of what it would have been before I moved here, and that's going to improve over the coming years as well, I hope. I don't have a mains water connection, so I don't have monthly bills for water, although that creates some challenges in itself, having to provide my own water, which I will create a video about at some point in the future. I recycle all my own waste, so I don't have waste collection charges. I do still have an electric connection to the mains. Although I have solar panels here, they aren't enough to meet the most basic electric needs for things like a fridge in the winter months, so I have to have a mains connection at the moment. I would love one day to get a proper solar array for the cottage and wind turbines for the winter, but that's a bit of a pipe dream at the moment. So I do have outgoings, the electric, and I have a car. Very difficult to live without a car out here. So there was a period when I first moved here when I worked part-time in a local shop, just stacking shelves, basic menial work really, to bring in a bit of extra cash to pay for basic living costs and expenses. I don't anymore. I haven't done for the last year or so, but it was necessary at that time, and it may well be necessary again at some point in the future. I'm not sure. I certainly don't feel any shame in doing something like that, though. It was only 10 to 15 hours a week, and I'd much rather work in a local shop stacking shelves than commute into the nearest city or town and work in an office 40 or 50 hours a week. There's a huge difference between those two things for me. But the point is, you do need some money to live. It may well be possible to survive if I just ate nothing but potatoes and kale and maybe a few eggs, and I didn't have a car and I didn't have internet, and I just kind of sat in my caravan most of the day. It may well be possible to not have any money, but if you really want to develop the land and restore the cottage and all these things that I aspire to do, I do need money to do that. So there has to be some form of income. However, I think what a lot of us have got wrong, including myself for over a decade, it has to be said, is that old cliche of living to work rather than working to live. You do need some money. I've said that many, many times now, but you don't need much. If you're willing to compromise on wealth and luxury and all the added extras that we take for granted in life, and just focus on quality of life instead of that, everyday quality of life and fulfillment, then you can really get by with very, very little money. And I think that's something that I'm trying to practice and demonstrate rather than just preach. So the next question is, how do I cope with isolation, and do I not get lonely out here? I think a lot of people who aspire to a similar life, growing their own food, living in quite a remote location, they want that life, but they feel like they would be too isolated, too cut off from society to be happy. And people quite often say to me that they really admire what I do, but they could never do it themselves. The first thing I have to say about that is, this is rural Ireland that I live in, not Outer Mongolia. Just 10 minutes across those fields out there is a little town with a few shops and a pub or two, and all the facilities that I need really in a little town. And there are houses dotted about all over the place, so I'm not really that isolated. And I also have internet access too out here. It's not very good. There's no physical line, being so remote. But I do have a mobile phone signal, which is kind of on and off 3G, so it's good enough to send and receive mails and watch the odd YouTube video in a very low resolution. I can even keep in touch with friends on WhatsApp and read the news in the morning and basic things like that. But it just gives me that sense of connectedness to the outside world, which I think is really important, and a big part of the reason that I don't feel isolated, I think, is the fact that I have internet access here. And just a couple of decades ago, in fact, more recently than that, even just 1 decade ago, that wouldn't have been possible. There would have been no mobile phone signal out here. It's a very recent change that in a way makes this kind of life possible for someone like me. I don't think I'd be comfortable out here without internet access. I think I would feel isolated without that. Having a car helps enormously as well. I recently started a couple of part-time college courses in horticulture and furniture restoration, which will give me even more subjects to make videos about, as if I needed them. But it also kind of keeps me in contact with humanity a couple of days a week, which is probably a good thing. Just socializing a little bit and not feeling too isolated. I'm the sort of person by nature who I'm quite comfortable with solitude most of the time, and I think you do have to be like that to enjoy this kind of lifestyle. But even for me, it's nice to have a bit of contact with other people, that's fairly consistent, every week. Um, Obviously, going back to having a car, that's not the most environmental thing. I'd love an electric car, absolutely love one, but I just can't afford one right now. They're far, far too expensive. Um, and I know having a car, isn't the most sustainable thing to do, but I drive it very, very little compared to the average commuter. So from an environmental standpoint, my impact is very, very low compared to the average person. And one day, in the future, I will get an electric car and I will charge it myself from my own energy supply. I just have to work towards that day. And that's the thing about sustainability. It's you have to be realistic. It's about doing what you can that's in the interests of the environment within the context of a happy, fulfilled life. It's no good having, aspirations that are way, way up here and unachievable. Be realistic, but the things that you can do, do them. So I think feeling isolated is really about how you live, not where you live. Thinking about my own life, I've certainly felt a greater sense of isolation living in cities, surrounded by thousands or millions of people, not knowing who you are or even caring who you are, in which you feel terribly anonymous, like you don't really exist. Believe me, it's very, very hard to be anonymous in rural Ireland. Every one of my neighbours knows who I am. Even the ones I'd rather didn't know who I am. And there's not many of those. Most of them are absolutely lovely people who would do anything for you to help you. And that's a great feeling. I've never had that living in cities, ever. But if you choose to isolate yourself, then of course this kind of life has the potential to be very lonely. For myself, I like that I'm a little bit disconnected from the rest of society. I like that my piece of the world is surrounded by nature and not people, not overlooked by people. But I also like that I can just hop in the car and within 10 minutes I'm in a little town. I like that humanity and society is on my doorstep. It's just out there beyond those fields and I can go and tap into it whenever I need it. For me personally, that's the perfect balance. So the third question is, what about family? I think a lot of people contemplating this kind of life can't imagine the idea of moving away from family, which is something I understand. Obviously, most of my family are back in the UK, where I grew up. But let's face it, the UK isn't really that far from Ireland. I could be back there in less than a day if I needed to be. So it's not like I've moved to Australia or something like that, but it's true to say I don't have family in Ireland. But it's equally not that far from where I do have family. But saying all that, I left home when I was 18, not just for university, but permanently. And I've lived independently ever since then. I've also lived overseas. I lived in France for a few years and I spent a lot of time in Canada. So I'm kind of used to being very independent from my family. And I think that helps enormously in making a move like this. Some people, they live their entire lives close to their family, and if you're one of those people, then it's probably a lot harder for you to do something like this than it is for me. It's all about what you're used to, I guess. So I've read quite a few comments as well from people advising me to never have children, which always makes me smile. I certainly don't have any yet, and I can see how having children would create an even bigger challenge living a lifestyle like mine. I can also see how people out there watching my videos who do have kids, on top of careers, jobs, mortgages to pay, all those responsibilities and obligations to other people, would feel trapped in that life, like you know, they may aspire to do what I'm doing, but they feel like they never could. And that's partly why I wanted to do this while I'm still in a position to. Because, you know, I would like to have a family of my own one day. Who knows if that'll happen, but I would like to think as well, if I do have children one day, they will fit in with my lifestyle rather than me having to change it for them. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there watching thinking, yeah, right, we'll see, I guess. But for the moment, I'm quite happy living my life here without any children running around. So, going back to the question, I guess I'm one of those people who just doesn't need family to be close to me in order to be happy. Maybe that makes me a little bit strange, I'm not sure. Maybe it's just a product of my life. I am quite an introvert by nature. And bear in mind as well that I live with a pretty cool dog who keeps me company no matter what. And I have animals that occupy my time, and I also have volunteers coming and staying with me here during the warmer months, who do bits and bobs, you know, tasks in exchange for learning new skills and having a place to stay when they're travelling around Ireland. So, you know, I'm seeing and interacting with people constantly. So I suppose maybe family is different for each of us. I've certainly never felt an absence of family in moving here or in living here. I suppose the only time I have really is when I've been unwell, and we all experience sickness from time to time. Luckily for me, though, I've got some pretty amazing friends, one in particular who really helped me out during a tricky period. And you know who you are, and that's something which I'm eternally grateful for and very lucky to have. So that's it from me on this very chilly New Year's Eve. I need to get the fire going again. It's gone out while I was making this video. The next video is going to be about trees, if I can get a break in the weather. More particularly though, how to use trees in a sustainable way if you're trying to live self-sufficiently. It's one of my favourite subjects, trees, and there's a huge amount that I've learnt since moving here, so I'm really looking forward to making that and sharing some of the knowledge that I have. I know that a lot of you really want to see a video about the cottage, and I am planning to make a video kind of showing you around the cottage as it is now in the very near future. The reason I haven't done that yet is the cottage is currently in a stage where I'm stripping back layers and removing things like layers of concrete render that have been added to the outside, and the roof, which is all corrugated iron now. It used to be thatch, but it's been replaced with iron, and you know, there's a lot of plaster to strip out and concrete floors. It's very sad, but it's over the last 30, 40, 50 years it's been modernized, and really a lot of what I'm doing at the moment is just stripping out all those layers. So I suppose a part of me was reluctant to make a video about it because I want to show you the restoration. I want to show you me bringing it back to its former glory and putting back those traditional features like the old wooden windows and lime render and things like that. But I realise there's a huge amount of interest in seeing the cottage as it is now, and maybe that's a good thing, so you can see the kind of the before and after videos, you know. So I am going to make a video about the cottage as well, but it won't be the next one. Look out for that. So thank you for watching. I hope everyone's had a wonderful Christmas and you're all sobering up for the new year. May it be as productive for you as I hope it will be for me. I've got a lot of stuff planned for 2019. It's very exciting, I can't wait. And I hope I'm going to be able to share it with you as well. That's the plan. Thanks again, and I'll see you again soon.